What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be talking about Metallica's Death Magnetic, their ninth studio album. This is a very, very interesting Metallica album. One of the most important albums in their history, for three main reasons. Um, First one is they got a new bass player by the name of Rob Trujillo. Although he was hired in 2003, he did not play on Saint Anger. Bob Rock actually filled in the bass duties, kind of a studio musician sort of thing. Which brings me to my second point. They decided to part ways with their longtime producer, Bob Rock, who had been with them since the Black Album, so 91. Yeah, one of those 2 years. Um, because they this isn't well documented. Obviously, the band doesn't like to talk about the exact reasons why they decided to part ways with their producer that they've had for such a long time. Um, but we can all kind of guess um, why they decided to part ways with Bob. Um, because the direction that they wanted to go, they probably didn't feel comfortable with Bob being in the fold. Like they couldn't make the album that they wanted to with Bob. Um, I bet that was a super awkward conversation. I wonder if it was something that Bob knew was happening or if it was something that just kind of came out of nowhere. I would have loved to have been like a fly on the wall, that conversation of like, hey, you've been with us for, you know, 2 decades plus, but we're gonna let you go, and kind of here's why. Um, and the new direction that I'm referring to is, of course, the fact that they wanted to kind of return to their roots, kind of their 80s style. And once again, this is something that isn't really well documented because, them kind of going back to their roots after experimenting for so long, they probably don't want to talk about how, they're done experimenting and, this is what they wanted to do, just that kind of thing. Yeah, definitely go back to their roots of their 80s material, kind of their speed, thrash metal, original roots. So to produce this album, they got very well known producer by the name of Rick Rubin. He's done everything from rock to pop to rap, as far as producing albums and helping the artist produce those albums. Most notably in the metal community, he's worked with Slayer a lot. He's produced a lot of Slayer albums, so that was probably one of the reasons that they chose him. Um, in the rock world, I know he's worked with System of a Down. Yeah, just to name a few. He's a very well known, kind of respected. People have their opinions on him, but for the most part, he's a pretty respected producer that's definitely been around the block. So, with all of those things in mind, let's just jump into the tracks. First song on the album is called "That Was Just Your Life," and it starts out with like this faint heartbeat, which sounds pretty cool given the song title. I'm gonna try not to move my camera as much today. Given the song title, it's pretty cool. And then you've got just kind of some faded, kind of guitar strings. You could tell whoever's doing it, it's probably James. Um, Excuse me. It kind of like builds up that atmosphere, and I'm a pretty big believer in that an album opener should probably do one of two things. It should either kind of hit you in the face, kind of grab you by the hand and say, "All right, come on, you're listening to this album and you're doing nothing else for the next, hour." or however long the album happens to be, or it should drag you in, just kind of that slowly but surely until until it just kind of hits you with something abrupt. And this is definitely this is definitely what that song does. And James is kind of hitting some open strings after kind of the heartbeat and the finger picking kind of happens. He's hitting that open string, but then once the main riff kicks in, you know exactly what you're listening to, and who you're listening to, given the fact that they want to go back to their roots. This is 80s Metallica. This is 80s Metallica, definitely. Um, what they set out to accomplish, um, they've definitely achieved with this song, with track one. And given the fact that they want to go back to their roots, and what's that going to sound like, to have a strong track one is even more important in my mind, given these circumstances. So yeah, I mean, James's vocal delivery is super fast. He probably hasn't done anything like that since the 80s, since Justice, their last 80s album. Very, very good song. Kirk's solo is very, very good. The guitar solos are back. Obviously, they'd have to be, right? Um, there was no guitar solos on Saint Anger, but if you want to return to your roots, you've definitely got to put metal back in Metallica, and part of that is having guitar solos. I don't think I can say it any better than that. Very, very strong way to open up the album. Just fast, frantic, no pun intended. Just a very, very solid opener. Um, Next song on the album is called "The End of the Line." Whereas this is still a pretty good song. I like it. The intro is pretty cool. Sounds unique, but it doesn't sound like super special. But it's still good. Um, the lyrics are pretty good. The lyrics are kind of like all over the place. It's kind of takes you here and here and here, and you kind of have to like connect them in your mind. It's kind of like very much up to the listener, that sort of thing. Um, Kirk's solo on this song is not really good. It's not one that I want to remember from Kirk. It's probably one he doesn't want to remember. Because you've got to know when you put out a solo like this that it's just going to be up to criticism. And yeah, not a good solo, but the rest of the song's good. The rest of the song's pretty good. Yeah. The next song on the album is called "Broken, Beaten, Scarred," and I'm just gonna come out and say it. This song reminds me of "The Shortest Straw," and from the Justice album. And this is kind of people's complaint if they don't like this album. It's kind of one of the main things that they complain about, that they've kind of rehashed all their 80s stuff, and just kind of put like a modern twist on it, which I completely disagree with. There are parts on this album that sound like a quote unquote copy. I don't want to use copy because I I like this album, but it's definitely they used the blueprint of the 80s, and they weren't shy about that. Um, and they still put out some good original music, but there are times where you can tell that that they kind of not only took inspiration from the 80s, but just flat out took parts of the 80s and put these in these songs. It doesn't affect me. It may affect you, and I would understand that, but as a whole, it shouldn't get in the way of you listening to this album. Now, back to the song. Um, yeah, it reminds me of The Shortest Straw. The intro, the kind of the staccato. I don't know if staccato is the right word. Just kind of abrupt, kind of guitar lines with the drums, the dun 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 dun, that sort of thing. if you know what I'm if you know what I'm talking about, like you'll get it. If not, just kind of skip over that part. Um, but yeah, reminds me of the shortest straw. If you can get past the repetition in this song, then you'll like this song. It's got a good Kirk solo. Um, it's got a really good Kirk solo, and if you can get past the repetition in this song, you're gonna like this song because it's lyrically it's good. It just repeats just a tad. Um, Next song on the album is called "The Day That Never Comes," and this is going to remind everyone of the quote unquote ballads that they used to do in the 80s: Sanitarium, Fade to Black, One. It's going to remind you of those three songs. And especially because it's the fourth song on the album. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but Fade to Black, Sanitarium, and One were always the fourth song on those albums were kind of reserved for these ballady type intro type songs. So yeah, it should definitely remind you of those songs, and in a definitely a positive way. Um, yeah, it's got one of my personal favorite Metallica Kirk solos of all time. The solo's ridiculously good. The intro is kind of like it's very the guitar is like kind of like whispering in the wind. I don't know why I'm getting so poetic, but and then it just kind of goes into the main clean riff. It's a very very good song with some excellent lyrics. The outro is very very good. Just kind of all over the place. Kind of starts out soft and kind of goes to this hectic, crazy place, much like their ballads in the 80s. Very, very good song. Very much a tip of the cap to the 80s in the best way. 80s Metallica. But I didn't need to tell you that. I'm repeating myself. Um, Next song on the album is called All Nightmare Long. And this is a very very good song. One of the examples of Metallica just going back to their roots in the best way. This doesn't really like steal or copy or whatever negative way you want to say from the 80s. It sounds very original. It sounds very much like modern day thrash metal should sound. It's fantastic. Once again, it's got one of Kirk's better solos on the album. Very very good. He offered two solos on here, and they're both pretty good. Um, but yeah, I mean the way James says luck runs out, he has this great like it's this great creepy vibe, and it's amazing, and it sounds like original 21st century thrash metal. It sounds amazing. Um, Next song on the album is called Cyanide, and this is a song I sort of go back and forth with. I'm not. This isn't one of my favorites, and I'm not a huge fan of this song. But if you like this song, I can understand why. Um, the intro just kind of other than kind of Rob's bass, it's pretty cool that he's kind of you can kind of hear the bass and he's kind of featured in the intro. But the wah that kind of the wah that Kirk is that he brings to the intro specifically um, isn't that good. I don't really like that riff. The main riff's okay. There's a kind of softer part in the bridge. It's a decent song. It's not one of my favorites. it's kind of, over the years, it's become the most skipped song on the album for me. So that's my thoughts. If you like it, I would understand. Not a big fan. Next song on the album is the third installment of the Unforgivens. Um, and the pattern of the Unforgivens, I don't know if you guys have kind of got the pattern down or anything, but they've released an Unforgiven every other album since, of course, where it started, the Black Album. So they didn't write one on Load, but they wrote one on Reload. They didn't write one on Saint Anger, but they wrote one on Death Magnetic here. So we will see if there's a fourth Unforgiven or not on the next album, because they didn't write one on Hardwired, because they're kind of, at least my observation, they're kind of following this pattern of every other album. But most things happen in threes, happen in trios, so they may or may not have a fourth Unforgiven on this next album. I'll be very interested to find that out. But that's a side note. This definitely sounds different than the other two Unforgivens. Some say that it's kind of unrecognizable as an Unforgiven song. I would agree with you, but I still slightly disagree. The intro kind of has the horns that's definitely, obviously, reminiscent of the Unforgivens. That horn in the intro has it in both Unforgiven songs. But it goes to like this piano, almost like classical intro, and it's very, very good. I like the intro a lot, even though it's different than from what you expect from the Unforgivens. You can tell in this song, and I forgot to kind of mention it on The Day That Never Comes, but Lars, his drum sound is different. Obviously, nothing's going to be as bad as Saint Anger, but the drums on this album, they don't sound too great, and this kind of brings me to a problem that people have with this album in general. I'm going to kind of take a side note. Hopefully this side note won't take too long. The production on this album, although Rick Rubin is a well-known and for the most part respected producer, he's been in the game for a long time. He kind of has the reputation of making things just loud, just a wall of noise, and that's definitely, you can definitely hear that with a lot of cases in this album. If this album was just fine-tuned just a bit, it would definitely add just a greater quality to the album. But whether or not that brings the album down too much, I'm going to let you decide. Back to Lars's drum sound. Like I said, it's nothing's going to be as bad as the Saint Anger trash cans. But you can definitely hear that his drum sound is just like way too loud, and it almost sounds hollow, like hollow kind of. It almost kind of sounds at times that he's like hitting like empty cardboard boxes with a drum sound. I if I don't know what I'm talking about, just kind of let me know and ignore me. But it's definitely got like a fat sound, like, kind of if you were to hit an empty cardboard box, but it still sounds like drums, obviously. It's just, you can definitely hear that in this song, and I'm sorry that I forgot to mention it in The Day That Never Comes. It's very obvious, kind of the hollow cardboard box sound that his drums kind of offer. I definitely noticed that about these two songs and on this album occasionally. But getting back to the Unforgiven, this is it's a good song. It can stand aside in a different way to the other two Unforgivens. I like the song. It's definitely kind of like a self-reflective type song. These seas of gold. This guy kind of getting lost out at sea and trying to find himself. Um, it's a good song. It's definitely kind of a controversial song in Metallica's catalog. I like kind of the send off. Forgive me, why can't I forgive me? And then kind of goes into Kirk's solo. Kirk's solo on this song is it's pretty good. I like it. It's yeah, it's a good song. Not a great song, but it's a good song. Next song on the album is called Judas Kiss, and this is another kind of great example of just great 21st century thrash metal. You get one of the negatives. You can hear Lars's drums. He does kind of like a drum, excuse me, kind of like a drum roll sort of thing. That kind of contrasts the beginning riff, and you hear the negative of his drum sound. But other than that, the song's pretty damn good. One of Kirk's most underrated solos that nobody talks about. He uses the wah pedal perfectly. Um, Kind of builds up atmosphere. He kind of like puts his foot on the wah pedal and then takes it off just kind of in the beginning, and he's using it as kind of like a plateau. He kind of like starts here and then just rips this guitar solo, and it's a very very good, once again, a guitar solo of Kirk's that kind of has gotten lost in the Metallica discography. It's a very, very good solo. But yeah, overall, great solo. Some pretty good lyrics. But yeah, a great example of 21st century thrash metal for sure. Next song on the album is Suicide and Redemption. And, if you're not convinced that Metallica is trying to go back to their 80s, this will definitely convince you. Um, this is an instrumental, which is something that they haven't done since the 80s, since the Justice album was their last album in the 80s, but you already know that. I'm just rambling on. I'm not a big fan of instrumental music, just in general. But this definitely sounds. I mean, it's a pretty good song. I can enjoy it for what it is. This is definitely kind of a continuation of "To Live Is to Die" from the Justice album. Um, Pretty good, pretty good song. Like I said, I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it for what it is. It's got a pretty good quiet part in there, probably my favorite part in the song. But yeah, it's pretty good, and I can appreciate it. Um, the last song on the album is called My Apocalypse. And if you are aware, if you're familiar with Metallica's 80s material, you know that for the most part, um, they like to end the album on a huge bang, on the fastest, most dynamic shred song. They like to end the album on a song like that. Apart from Ride the Lightning, where they ended it on Call of Cthulhu, it's an instrumental, um, and this song tries to kind of follow that trend of the ending the album on a great thrashy bang. Um, this song, it attempts that, and for Metallica's first album, kind of quote unquote back to their roots. It's a pretty good song, and I definitely give them kudos for trying to end the album that way. Um, it's a good song. The lyrics are pretty good. The lyrics are pretty dark, which I can when dark lyrics are done well, I love them. And this song does it pretty well. I mean, it's not my one of my favorite sets of dark lyrics, but it's pretty good. It works pretty well. Um, Kirk actually writes a riff um, in the bridge, and it kind of when Kirk and James kind of swap places, you can they kind of bring out the some of their best work. When James writes solos and when Kirk writes riffs, it definitely kind of quote unquote brings them out of their comfort zone, but it like challenges them in the best way. Yeah, because James is pretty good at writing some good emotional solos, and Kirk is definitely has his good share of riffs. This the bridge riff that Kirk writes is no exception. Very very good riff, and it's kind of a send off to his solo. He's got a really really good solo on this song, and I like how James kind of sends it off. You know, the spit it out. You know, um, you're welcome for that vocal demonstration. But yeah, it's a very good way. It's one of the highlights of the song. It's a very good way to kind of send into the solo. Um, Pretty good song. They could have ended the album a little bit better, but like I said, I definitely want to give kudos to Metallica for trying to write a thrashy, banging finale, considering this is their first album back to their roots. So yeah, that's the album. Some final closing thoughts. Um, if you're someone who complains about this album, I don't. I mean, you have somewhat of a valid argument if you want to like pick this album apart and just try to be negative. But if you're an old school Metallica fan who harks back, who's been wanting the '80s back, I don't understand how you don't like this album. Album definitely has its flaws, production wise, and things of that nature. But yeah, this is a great album, and if you're an old school Metallica fan, I really think you're gonna like this album. So that about wraps it up. Um, Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Stay safe during all these uncertain times, and God bless you guys. All right, bye bye.